What does a civic revival in the United States look like, since it is so central to your mission?
Well, that's what you guys are diving in, right?
Yes, sir.
So I think a lot of people talk about traditional civics as voting and helping people vote. I think that's a very closed version of what civics is. And, I could talk for hours about how civics isn't taught in schools and how our students aren't civically active or whatever. But I think what a civic revival means is really getting people in the mind frame that they have to support their communities and the people around them in so many different ways, right? It's more than voting. It's having conversations that are necessary for learning and unlearning in your communities. It's helping your fellow community members, prepare for job interviews or get that degree or, just into better situations than they are right now. And I think what we want to emphasize at Civics Unplugged is the community focus in America has kind of been lost. And if we help uplift each other in our communities, I think we can make a lot of real change across the nation.
What are the steps to get people more involved in local policy? Last summer, I worked with my local legislature, and it seemed like there was more attention on the national sphere as opposed to the local sphere. How do you get Gen Zers to actually care about their community's government?
Well, I don't know if it's just the community government, to be honest with you. I think local legislature is important, but I think that there's a lot of young people in this country right now who are working on projects that are kind of tangential to local policy, but not really in the government sphere, right? There's a lot of students who are working on projects that educate lower grade levels in their community. There's a lot of people in our program even that work with homelessness in their community. And I think if we can uplift, if we can show all students or all young people that being an activist or being influential in politics is not just, going to your legislature and writing a letter or going to a protest, but it's so many different things that you can do to get involved. I think that's how you get the ball rolling. The first step is just showing how easy it is to make a difference and how many different avenues that there are to do that.
I think that's an important note, but one that's a little bit difficult because it revolves around some level of education. And I'd love to dive into kind of how you're going about doing that with Civics Unplugged, given the fact, just as you mentioned, we don't get a civics education in the United States, especially for Gen Zers who we're facing.
I wouldn't say we don't, but we get less than other generations.
Sure, and it's not mandated, but we have so many challenges that we're facing at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, like you guys probably know, and it's civics education now, right? A lot of people can say they get their education in the civic space from social media and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And we could talk for hours about the polarization and the misinformation on that platform. But what it really boils down to is that we just need to create more opportunities for engagement in communities instead of just regular historical-based civics education, right? It's one thing to tell a bunch of kids, hey guys, this is how you register to vote. Great, you passed your civics class, you know about the Mount Rushmore and the three branches of government. It's another thing to take a group of students out into their community and work on a cleanup project or work with a homeless shelter or work with a local nonprofit. And these opportunities are not so distant from these teachers, right? And it's not the teachers that don't want to do them, but the school boards are so reluctant to branch out their curriculums. But there are nonprofits everywhere that would love student volunteers to come in for a day and help. There are homeless shelters everywhere that would love student volunteers every day. And I think that once you get students involved in that type of work, they really see that the first step is just taking action and really, branching out there. And that's, I think, a great way to get the ball rolling and kind of get them in the mindset of making change for the rest of their lives.
Whether it be working for a local food shelter or helping out the homeless, it seems like those sorts of activities or forms of community development spark a sense of pathos, an emotional connection to your community. From your experience or from what you've seen with your organization, how has this level of empathy contributed towards your larger movement?
That's such a great question. I think empathy today is something that's lost. I think in this current context of COVID, I think that school boards have lost empathy, forcing kids to work abnormal hours. Jobs have lost empathy. Huge companies have lost empathy. And at Civics Unplugged, we really try to do two things, right? We try to foster a sense of community within our fellowship and the young people in our community, which is growing at a huge pace. And we try to foster a sense of responsibility in repairing American democracy. And the empathy part comes in where we see, debates, and when we try to teach how to have conversations and how to, go above the partisanship and actually just talk about the issue, and from a systems perspective, right, analyze the issue and figure out a place where you can best put your energy to make a difference. And I think we don't have a lot of direct lessons on empathy, but we do have a lot of conversations about personal development and self-learning, which I think is another thing that we lack in schools. Surprise. But I think that a lot of students don't know about their superpowers. Like, when were you guys, if ever, taught about your superpowers, or taught about where you can grow yourselves or how you can grow yourselves, right? And then when did you sit in a circle with your friends and say, all right, you are really good at conversation. Like, how can you help me and how can I help you? Those conversations are not fostered in our education system. And because they're not fostered, students don't have this sense of connection and the sense of empathy for their peers. And that goes on into later life and contributes to this cycle of indifference, which is really harmful.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I think there's a big question to be had in the question of our education and how we are brought up through education as to what should the role, especially of public schools, be, right? Are they supposed to be in a parenting position where they do things just like that, where they teach you about personal development, teach you about things on reflecting, or is it purely from an academic standpoint of math and science and literature? And this is one that troubles me a lot, because regardless of whether or not people should view it not to be a location of some level of parenting, it is, right? So what systematic changes in our education system? Let's say you could change everything today. What are a few things you would change?
That's really, it's a good question. And I will say, I'll give you my answer, but I also want to, take all these questions in a bigger scheme of things, right? So first, I think that in order to create the types of leaders and the types of people we need in the future to kind of make our society a place where everybody is equal and everybody wants to be happy in, we need to make significant changes in the way that we even structure our schools. Right? The structure of education right now is still the model that we use to train factory workers. Yep. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm not planning to work in a factory, and none of my friends are planning to work in a factory anytime soon. And, I think that we need to provide opportunities for students that do want to go into technical jobs. I think we need more opportunities like that. I think we need more experiential learning. And I think we also just need to reimagine education. It's not enough to, iterate upon old ideas, because the base old idea is inherently flawed. We need to have curriculums that can be taught online. COVID showed us that our curriculums in schools and our teachers, no fault to them, were not suited for online learning. And in the 21st century, that shouldn't be the case anywhere. But the question is, how do we get to those reforms, right? And the only way to make significant change in any field in America, in my opinion, and the opinion of most of the people that I work with at Civics Unplugged, is by reforming democracy. If more people have the chance to vote, if more people have the chance to have their voice heard, if more people have the chance to run for office, then we can have a more full picture of the American idea of reform in every space, right? Environment, education, criminal justice. Any field that you want to change, you need to change democracy first. And that's why we are working so hard at Civics Unplugged to create leaders that think about democracy as a space that needs to be fixed before everything else.